Hi, everybody. This is Mrs. Pearson, your elementary ELL teacher. Today we're going to go over Chapter 14, Vocabulary Words 1 to 5 for Bud Not Buddy. So for this lesson, you will need a pencil and a piece of paper or journal page, and you're going to divide the paper into 3 equal parts or thirds, and then you're going to write your numbers 1 to 5. So if you don't have your materials, push pause, get your paper and pencil, and when you're ready to join me, push play. Because you're going to write your word or phrase for each number. And then in the next column, you're going to write a synonym. And a synonym is a word that means the same, just like combine is a synonym for mix. If you don't catch the synonym, you can write the word a second time. And then in the third column, I want you to draw a quick picture or sketch. So here's our learning target. I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand important words and phrases from Chapter 14 of Bud Not Buddy. Success criteria. How will you know you're successful at using pictures and context clues to help you understand important words and phrases from Chapter 14? Well, here are our steps to success. Number 1, I will. Write down each vocabulary word. Number 2, I will. Write a synonym or short definition for each word. Number 3, I will. Listen and follow along to each quote from the chapter. Look for the vocabulary word or phrase. And then number 4, go back and draw a quick sketch for each word. So listen closely. Simile. Simile is a type of figurative language. A simile is a comparison of two things using the words like or as. His face lit up like a light bulb when he figured out the math problem. So listen closely to this. I closed my eyes and took in a big snort of air. It was like someone took an old pot and poured about 100 gallons of hot apple cider and 100 gallons of hot coffee into it, then stirred 8 or 9 sweet potato pies, crusts and all, into that. Then let 6 big steamy meatloafs float on top of all that. Then threw in a couple handfuls of smashed potatoes, then boiled the whole thing on high. This must be exactly how heaven smells. So the Sweet Pea restaurant smells like 100 gallons of hot apple cider, and also someone put a bunch of 6 big steamy meatloafs on top of it, then threw in some sweet potato pies, and that is a simile. And this must be exactly how heaven smells. So Bud describes the Sweet Pea restaurant. It smells like 100 gallons of hot apple cider, 100 gallons of hot coffee. You stirred in 9 sweet potato pies and put in 6 big steamy meatloafs and mashed potatoes. And this is what heaven smelled like. So we've got hyperbole. Hyperbole. A hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration used for emphasis. There is a ton of food on the table. That's an exaggeration. So, number 1, I want you to write Blind Lemon Jefferson. Blind Lemon Jefferson. He is a famous person. And then here is the quote. She said, "Dark or not, even blind Lemon Jefferson could see something's wrong with this baby's eye." Miss Thomas. So who is blind Lemon Jefferson? Oh, so that's an hyperbole. So she said, dark or not, even blind Lemon Jefferson, who was a blind African American blues singer, would have been able to see something's wrong with Bud's eye. So blind Lemon Jefferson was born in 1893 and he died in 1929. He was an American blues singer and guitarist from Texas. He was one of the most popular blues singers of the 1920s. So you could say that blind Lemon Jefferson was an American blues singer. So here is idiom. An idiom is a saying that has a completely different meaning than the actual words themselves, just like it's raining cats and dogs, so take your umbrella. So number 2, as light as a feather. As light as a feather. That means very light. So here's our quote. She said, dark or not, even blind Lemon Jefferson could see something's wrong with this baby's eye. What happened here, Bud? She touched underneath my eye, as light as a feather. So Miss Thomas's touch was as light as a feather. So that is a simile and an idiom because they're comparing how Miss Thomas touched under Bud's eye. Her touch was as light as a feather. But when you say something's as light as a feather, it's a common idiom as well. Number 3, put up your dukes. Put up your dukes. That means to hold up your fists in preparation for a fight. To hold up your fists in preparation for a fight. Put up your dukes. And that is also an idiom. And here is our quote. I said, well, ma'am, Todd Amos woke me up by shoving a pencil up my nose all the way to the R. And when I went to punch him, I slapped him instead, and it left a big welt on his cheek. So we put up our dukes and went at it. And it didn't take long before I knew I couldn't whip him. So I just curled up and fell down. So Bud and Todd were fighting. They put up their dukes. They held up their fists and fought. Here is a type of figurative language, alliteration. Alliteration. So, alliteration is the use of words that begin with the same sound. So, Sally sells seashells down by the seashore. Sally sells seashells down by the seashore. All right, number 4, stampede. Number 4, stampede, a sudden panicked rush or charge of a number of horses or cattle. What is a stampede? It's a sudden rush or charge of a number of horse or cattle. So here's a picture of a stampede. For a second, it looked like a stampede of dusky devastators of the Depression. They all jumped up at once and started heading for our table. So the dusky devastators of the Depression, that's alliteration. The dusky devastators of the Depression looked like a stampede moving to the table. And that is a simile because it's using the word like. Dusky devastators of the Depression, that's alliteration, look like a stampede. They were moving so quickly to the table. Number 5, on the house. On the house means free. The house or restaurant will pay for it. It's on the house. And that's an idiom or a common phrase. It was the best meal I've ever had. And it was when it was done, Miss Tyler brought me a dessert she called on the house. So she said, "Here's a dessert, bud. It's on the house." It was a piece of warm sweet potato pie with some fluffy white stuff called whipped cream swapped all over the top of it. So Miss Tyler gave Bud a sweet potato pie and said, "It's on the house," meaning it's free. And there's his sweet potato pie. So here is another type of figurative language, metaphor. A metaphor is a comparison of two things. You do not use the words like or as in a metaphor. The racer was a lightning rod coming across the finish line. So here is another thing that you need to listen for. I was smiling and laughing and busting my gut so much that I got carried away, and some rusty old valve squeaked open in me, then whoop, zoop, sloop. Tears started jumping out of my eyes so hard that I had to cover my face with the big red and white napkin that was on the table. So here's the valve that got squeaked open, and that's a metaphor. And tears were jumping out of my eyes. Tears were jumping out of my eyes. And that is personification. The tears were acting like a person. They were jumping out of his eyes. So here's another type of figurative language, onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the creation of words that imitate natural sounds. Buzz, buzz went the bee around my head. Buzz, buzz. So onomatopoeia is just sound words. So she said so quiet that I was the only one who could hear it. "Okay, baby. Okay. I know, sweetheart. I know." Then she started humming again, and with my ear mashed up against her chest, it felt like all my bones and muscles quit doing their jobs. It felt like something as big as a steam locomotive engine was chug, chug, chugging right past my ear. Chug, chug, chugging. Chugga, 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 chugga. So Bud was crying, and uh, it felt like all his muscles quit doing their jobs, and it was like he could hear a locomotive engine coming right past him going chugga 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 right past his ear. And chugga 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 is an onomatopoeia. All right, it's time to check your work for chapter 14, words 1 to 5. Blind Lemon Jefferson, an American blues singer and guitar player during the Depression. Number 2, as light as a feather. It's an idiom and a simile, very light. Put up your dukes, to hold up your fists in preparation for a fight. Number 4, stampede, a sudden panic rush or charge of a number of horses or cattle. On the house, free. The house or restaurant pays for it. It's on the house. So if you need to, this is a good time to check all your work. Make sure you have a word 1 through 5. And then in the next column, make sure you have a synonym or a short definition for each of these words. And then in the third column, a quick picture or sketch. So if you need to, push pause, finish this work, and then when you're ready to join me, push play. So at the top of your paper, I want you to reflect, how did you meet your learning target? I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand important words and phrases from chapter 14 of Bud Not Buddy. Would you give yourself a 4? I could teach this lesson. I wrote all the words. I wrote all the synonyms or definitions, and I drew all the sketches or pictures. Or would you give yourself a 3? I don't know why it's not moving. I could help others with this lesson. I wrote all the words, I wrote all the synonyms and definitions, and I drew all the sketches. Or would you give yourself a 2? I understood and completed some. I wrote some of the words. I wrote some synonyms and definitions. I drew some sketches and pictures. Or would you give yourself a 1? I understood and completed little. I wrote little to no words. I wrote little to no synonyms. And I drew little to no sketches. How do you think you did? 4, 3, 2, or 1? All right, everybody, thank you for doing the vocabulary words for chapter 14, words 1 to 5. I had a great time. I hope you did. Have a great day.